Hey friends, what's happening? It's Grim, and today we are here to have a look at the latest Shadowlands Beta build, and more specifically at the rogue conduits that were finally added after a long wait. Blizzard has described the conduits as being the tuning knobs to the Covenant system, and I think this is a pretty fair assessment. These conduits come in three different kinds, namely the Endurance conduits, which bolster your defensive abilities, the Finesse conduits, which will enhance your utility spells, and finally the Potency conduits, which directly boost your player power. Now those are the ones I'll be talking about in this video, and they come in two different types again. Firstly, the ones that will bolster your Covenant abilities, and secondly, ones that will specifically boost your spec abilities. Let's begin with having a look at the Covenant specific potency conduits, but before we start I want to point out that each conduit has got 15 different ranks, and you will level up through these as you progress through your Covenant storyline, your Covenant renown, and even by playing all the content that is available in Shadowlands. Also, at any given point you are only able to have a maximum of 3 potency conduits active. The potency conduit for the Kyrian ability Equine Reprimand simply buffs the damage of this ability by 50%, and as you level up through these ranks, it will go up to 120%. While this is a fairly decent buff, it does nothing to combat the slightly awkward style of having to play with this ability and trying to finish your finishes at the anima charged combo points. The Necrolord potency conduit gives your Bone Spike Bleed a 3% chance of dealing its damage again, increasing to 10% at max rank. Now, as far as I'm aware, having multiple Bone Spikes up on the same target does not increase its tick rate, and therefore also doesn't increase this chance. However, in an AoE situation, you will have multiple Bone Spikes out on various targets, which means there are more bleed ticks, which also increases the value of this conduit then. The Nightface specific conduit increases the damage of the Sepsis Bleed by 50%, but decreases by 10% each time it deals damage until it is back to normal damage. At max rank, however, this increases to 190% extra damage, which is a fairly sizable buff to this ability, which is already going to be quite popular with the Mantle of the Master Assassin legendary. And finally, the Ventir Covenant Potency Conduit increases the damage and critical strike chance of Slaughter by 12%, and this bonus is doubled when you already have your Slaughter Poison active, which requires you to use Slaughter at least once. Now this goes up to 40% at max rank and can be incredibly strong specifically for Subtlety, who will be able to use this during Shadow Dance. The only downside to this ability is that Slaughter costs 50 energy to use, which is quite a lot. However, I do like that this changes the viability and the playstyle of the Covenant just with this one conduit. Next, let's have a look at the spec-specific conduits, and we'll start off with having a look at Assassination. The first one of their conduits is called Lethal Poisons, and this increases the non-periodic damage of your poison by 30%. This even goes up to 100% at max rank, and this I believe should also work for the Slaughter Poison that comes with the Ventir Covenant ability. The next potency conduit is called Maim Mangle, and this simply increases the damage of your Mutilate by 20% on any target you have Garrote active on, increasing up to 60% at max rank. Seeing as you'll almost always have Garrote active on your main target and maybe even some other targets, this is a straightforward buff to Mutilate, which can be very strong on single target fights. And moving from single target to AoE, the next conduit is called Poisoned Finger Blades, and this increases the damage and poison application chance of your Fan of Knives by 8%, going up to 36% at max rank. This is very clearly oriented towards buffing Assassination's AoE and almost makes up for the loss of the Equine Blades Azerite trait. The last Assassination potency conduit is called Well-Placed Steel, and this increases the damage of your Shift on bleeding targets, which is almost all of your targets always, and also increases the duration of your Envenom buff by 1 second, going up to 3 seconds at max rank. This would make the Envenom buff, even used at max combo points, a total of 9 seconds. The Envenom buff itself increases the application chance of your poisons by 30%, so there's some clear synergy between this and the Lethal Poisons conduit, and perhaps even the Dashing Scoundrel legendary effect. Next up are the Outlaw potency conduits, and the first one of those is called Ambidexterity. While Blade Flurry is active, this increases the proc chance of your main Gauche, if that's how you pronounce that, by an extra 10%, going up to 24% at max rank. This is the Outlaw Mastery ability, which has a chance of proccing an extra offhand attack whenever you attack with your main hand. This is a decent buff to AoE, but nothing too substantial. The next Outlaw Conduit is called Count the Odds, and I'm a big fan of this one. This has a 7% chance when you use Ambush, Slaughter or Dispatch to give you a random Roll the Bones buff for 5 seconds. When you are stealth and using this, so this will only happen on Ambush probably, this duration is tripled. At max rank, this chance is also tripled to 21%. The next Outlaw Potency Conduit is called Sleight of Hand, and this has a 7% chance when you use Roll the Bones to instantly reset its cooldown, because as you may remember, this is now a cooldown in Shadowlands. This increases to a chance of 21% at max rank. While this may sound like a lovely return to the BFA style of re-rolling and fishing for good buffs, you have to keep in mind that even at 21%, this is not a very high chance, and also rolling the bones now costs double the energy that it did in BFA, so overall I'm not too big a fan of this particular conduit. The last Outlaw Conduit is called Triple Threat, and this gives your Sinister Strike a 20% chance, increasing to 35 at max rank, to strike a third time after it has struck a second time, which is a 35% chance whenever you use Sinister Strike. This is a decent buff to all of your overall damage. Lastly, let's have a look at all of these Subtlety Potency Conduits, and oh boy do they get all of the good stuff once again. Their first Potency Conduit is called Deeper Daggers, and when you use Eviscerate or Shadow Vault, this increases your shadow damage dealt by 30% for 5 seconds. At max rank, this increases your shadow damage dealt by 150%, but still for 5 seconds. Now, while you may not deal a lot of shadow damage naturally as sub, remember that when you have Find Weakness active on your target or any targets around you, both Eviscerate and Shadow Vault deal an extra 50% of their damage as shadow. So this is great synergy with itself and is incredibly strong. The next Subtlety Conduit is called Perforated Veins, and this makes your Shadow Strike increase the damage of your next backstab by 30% and stacks up to 3 times. At max rank, this increases to 100% damage, stacking up to 3 times. Because you alternate between Shadow Strike and Backstab as builders quite naturally because of Shadow Dance, this is a pretty decent buff to your whole rotation. The third sub-conduit is called Planned Execution, and this makes it so that your Symbols of Death increases your crit chance by 6%, going up to 34% at max rank. It seems slightly counterintuitive because when you use Symbols of Death, this guarantees that your next combo point builder will critically strike. It is still a pretty decent buff to everything that comes after that for the rest of the 10 seconds while Symbols of Death is active. The last Subtlety Potency Conduit is called Stiletto Staccato, and this makes it so that your Shadow Techniques, whenever it procs, reduces the cooldown of your Shadow Blades, your big DPS cooldown, by 1 second, going up to 3 seconds at max rank. Now, Shadow Techniques is the Subtlety Rogue passive, which has a chance on your auto attacks to proc and give you a combo point and some energy. This, combined with the new Slice and Dice increased attack speed, makes for another incredibly strong conduit. And that brings us to the end of the Potency Conduits that Blizzard has added so far. As with all things that I've been discussing in these last videos regarding the Shadowlands Beta, everything is still going to be coming down to number tuning before the final release of Shadowlands, so take any recommendations with a bit of a grain of salt until all of this is set in stone. I hope you guys have been enjoying the content so far, and make sure to subscribe and leave a like if you have and if you want to see more. If you have any questions or any recommendations for things you'd like to see, make sure to leave it in the comments below. And come find me on my stream for a chat at twitch.tv/Krimbile. Have a great day, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.